We could go in alone. We had just always felt welcomed, and I don't know. It was magical. There's something magical about the Iron Frog because people talk about it every day. Someone will come to you and say, when are you reopening it? I'm like, I can't do that again.
Hey, Brian Miller here, and welcome back to One New Person, the show where we take a closer look at chance encounters to remind ourselves that everyone and every interaction is meaningful. Today's guest is Pam Paydos, a Connecticut entrepreneur who, in the span of 5 years, opened not one, but 2 beloved and successful restaurants in an upscale and competitive community. I met Pam in 2010 when I first moved to Connecticut to reinvent my magic business from scratch. She was the first, and for months the only, local restaurant owner who took a chance on hiring a weekly magician. In this episode, Pam opens up about why she was able to create such thriving restaurants where most fail, how the business impacted her personal life, and, of course, her story of a chance encounter with lasting impact. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Pam, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome, Brian.
I want to set the mood a little bit for the listeners because we are sitting in your restaurant, which is Popover Bistro and Bakery?
Yes, exactly.
When it first opened, was it Popover Cafe?
It was Popover Cafe.
Okay.
And Popover Cafe was in New York City. It had closed before we opened, but she still owned the name. And she did not want us to use the name, so we had to switch it really quickly to Bistro.
But you know what? Bistro and Bakery, that's got such a quaint, a cute feel to it, which really suits Simsbury, Connecticut, which is the town it's in, which is this kind of picturesque, quintessential New England town. So that's really nice. When I talk about you, and I do talk about you, I would usually describe you as an entrepreneur. Is that how you see yourself?
I think so. Yeah, I think I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Even as a young child, I was always like doing the lemonade stands and making beaded bracelets and trying to sell them and always trying to find a way to make a little cash on the side. So yeah. It didn't happen until after my divorce that I truly became an entrepreneur and took a risk and opened a business.
Okay. And the first business was?
The Iron Frog.
The Iron Frog Tavern, which is how we met.
Exactly.
Yeah. I met you at the Iron Frog Tavern in 2010. I feel like it was relatively new when I got there.
It was. I don't think it was even a year old. It opened October of 2009.
Okay. So you've opened now 2 restaurants then in the span of, because this opened in what, 2014?
June, yeah.
So in the span of what, 5 or 6 years, you opened 2 different, both successful restaurants in a kind of a high-class, tight-knit town. That is not an easy thing to do. Is there something that you attribute your success twice? Because like once can be luck, but you've done it twice.
I think it's because I know the community and I knew what it was lacking. And the first time around was selfish reason. I was just divorced, I was a single mom, and I wanted a place where I could really feel comfortable going out and meeting people. And there was nothing like that in this area. So I created it. I'm like, I'm going to open a bar. A lot of people get divorced and they buy like a new handbag or like a really fancy couch. I'm like, I'm buying a bar. So that was done for a selfish need. I wanted something fun, I wanted something social, and it turned into just a great thing in town. And it overwhelmed me. It was a lot, running a bar and raising 2 kids. So that's why I ended up selling that and coming into this, which is a little more healthful. And I knew that we needed this concept in town as well.
That's interesting, because I never really knew when it closed why it closed, because it felt like it closed, that you sold it at the height of its success, because it was just doing so well. And anytime these days when I'm back in this area of Connecticut, if people recognize me at a show, they say, haven't I seen you somewhere? And I go, did you ever go to the Iron Frog Tavern? In Simsbury, I used to do magic on Saturday nights. And they go, oh yeah. And the second I mention the Iron Frog, they get happy and sad all at the same time. You can see it. People really miss it. You saw a need for it. What do you think was the quality of the Iron Frog? Because when I first moved to Connecticut, which was 2010, within 2 weeks of moving here, I had no clients, nobody waiting for me. I left all my business in upstate, and I was trying to rebuild my business as a magician. And I was like 4 or 5 people within the first week in Simsbury said, oh, you should go check out the Iron Frog Tavern and talk to Pam. I think they would like what you do there. What do you attribute the success of the Frog to?
I think it was safe. I always think of it as safe, and I talked to a lot of different people in town. It was safe for anybody to come into. Women could come in alone and feel comfortable. It was fun, it was inviting, and you'd walk in and you'd instantly feel like you saw a friend inside. And I feel like it was just comfortable. But a lot of women in particular, like, it was safe. We could go in alone. We had just always felt welcomed, and I don't know. It was magical. There's something magical about the Iron Frog because people talk about it every day. Someone will come to you and say, "When are you reopening it?" I'm like, I can't do that again. I just couldn't recreate it.
Right. So you touched on that a few minutes ago when you had said, you know, you were a single mom and you were running the Frog and it was overwhelming. What about it was overwhelming?
The hours, the responsibility. It was a huge responsibility as my kids were becoming teenagers, and I would hear sirens at 2 a.m. and I'm running a bar with 21-year-olds in it, and I didn't sleep at night. And it just came to a point where I didn't feel it was the right atmosphere for my kids in high school, and it just wasn't good for me anymore. It was up until 2:30 in the morning, then waking up at 6:30 and 7 and getting lunches made, because the mom role was the most important role to me. So juggling it all, and it was overwhelming. It was too much. But I didn't want it to keep going as Iron Frog. It was like, it was mine. Yeah. And I created it. And I was like, all right, it's at the top, and I don't want to go out in the bottom. I'd rather go out in the top and have everybody still wishing it was here.
It's the Seinfeld theory. They Seinfeld after 9 seasons, they were offered an unprecedented, at the time it would have been bigger than Friends money, and many years before it, they were offered an unprecedented deal to do a 10th season, and all 4 of them met and had a conversation, and they all agreed to walk away because Jerry always said, I'd rather, when people talk about Seinfeld, they say it was the greatest show of all time. And that they don't go, it was the greatest show of all time, except for that last season. Right?
Exactly.
You know?
I like that.
What do you enjoy most about what you do, whether it's in the entrepreneur kind of realm, or here at Popover, or in general, and just kind of your relationship with the community? What do you enjoy most about it?
I definitely enjoy the people. I enjoy, we're talking about connection also. I enjoy that I connect with different people every day here, and I fill a need that they can't get at other restaurants. And it's amazing. We'll have little kids come in who have never had a waffle because they have gluten-free or dairy-free issues, and they'll get this big Belgian waffle that they can eat, and they smile, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. Like something little like food, but everybody has to eat, and it's so important. So I think it's definitely the connections with the community, and I like being busy. You never know what a day is going to be like in the restaurant world. You have to be slightly crazy, I think, to own a restaurant or to be involved in this, because you will work harder than in any other job and make like the smallest amount of money. But you love it. It's a passion.
I can really relate to that being busy constantly thing. I'm one of those people that I love the idea of a day off, and as soon as I have one, I lose my mind.
Right.
If I'm supposed to, just last week, Lindsay and I took our first vacation since our honeymoon, because I work 7 days a week. I'm self-employed, and I'm always, even when I have a day off, I'm working all day, or in between things, I'm working, right? Of course.
Yeah,
and so like last week, we went to Disney for a week, and that's my ideal vacation because it's so active. I don't have time to think about work. If I took a beach vacation, within 3 hours of relaxing, I'd be like, all right, relaxing is stressing me out. I need to be around people. I need energy.
Right.
That is a stereotypically extrovert characteristic, the gaining energy from being around other people. Do you consider yourself an extrovert?
I don't know. I go back and forth between the two, because I can be in a crowded room and not want to talk to anybody. And sometimes I want to be like the life of the party. I don't know. I think about that all the time. I don't know if I'm a typical extrovert. I don't always like that.
The whole point of this particular show is about chance encounters and the kind of ripple effect that they have on that they can have on our lives and the lives of the people that we meet. Seemingly insignificant interactions that we can have on a day-to-day basis. Do you have a story of somebody that you met that impacted you impacted them, or both?
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. A few years ago, I was out with a girlfriend, just grabbing a beer. I think we were watching a baseball game, went to World of Beer in West Hartford Center, Blueback. And it was one of those nights where we weren't going to talk to anybody, both single, but we're not going to talk to anybody. We just want to hang out with each other, enjoy our company, have a few beers. And within an hour, there's a couple of guys standing by us, came over and talked to us. And one in particular, who I was talking to, very nice, very attractive guy, very athletic looking, outgoing, not someone who I would ever in my wildest dreams would have led me to yoga and to being mindful. And but Chris, he was just getting into practicing yoga and was talking to me about all the benefits of it. And I was doing it very casually, but he introduced me to the yoga shop in West Hartford, which is where I started practicing yoga. And in the past 2.5 years since I met Chris, I have made some of probably the best and most influential friends that I've had in my entire life through this little, we're not going to meet anybody, we're not going to talk to anybody. And instantly when I talked to you and I was looking at your book, I'm like, that's Chris for me. He brought me, and we're good friends. We went on 2 dates and like, that's not going to work, but tell me more about yoga.
See, I love stories like that where you can, it's so easy to close yourself off, especially you said you were there with some girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like most of the time when we're in social situations like that, especially when we go with friends, we tend to just stay in our own corner, hang out with each other. But I also, like you mentioned the book, I think somewhere in the book I talked about that it's actually, safety nets are not necessarily a bad thing, that you're sometimes more likely to actually reach out to somebody else when you know that your friends are there in case it doesn't work out, and you just kind of, then, you don't have a nice conversation, then you just slink back to your friends, and it's okay. So brought you to yoga, and we were mentioning kind of before we started recording, I mean, maybe we were during the sound check or whatever, but that yoga has become a big part of your life. Because I had actually mentioned that I see like on Instagram, like you're always posting yoga, and I know very little about it, but it's been suggested to me many times. And you mentioned mindfulness, which is this term that's really taken off in culture. It was actually, the word itself was actually invented by Dr. Ellen Langer. Have you ever read her book?
I haven't actually.
Highly recommend. So her book came out 25 years ago. Okay. It's called Mindfulness. She was the one who invented the term. She's this like groundbreaking social psychologist who's, I think, still a professor at Harvard in her 70s now. It was at the time she was studying mindlessness in the 70s. She was studying in social experiments the things that we do without thinking, and she accidentally happened upon this idea of staying present as the antidote, basically. Right. And now the term's been taken a little bit away from her and kind of just become a pop culture term. What does mindfulness mean to you?
Just being present. I feel like a lot of times in my life I have been going through motions, but I wasn't truly present. I would be at my daughter's hockey game, and I would be taking pictures of her playing, and I'd be sending my ex-husband, oh, here's a score, she just shot a goal, blah, blah. But I wasn't watching the game. And I just was never like fully present in a moment. Even having a conversation with someone, I'd be thinking about what I need to do next. And I think yoga slowed me down. I know yoga slowed me down, and it has me just thinking a little bit more, taking a deep breath, not reacting, but mainly being present in moments, in important moments that we're not always present in, especially as parents. We're doing so many different things, and we might be with our kids, but we're not with them.
I think that we have all, and I think actually adults have become much worse. For a while there, a lot, adults, parents, educators were really kind of waving that blame finger at kids for being on their phones too much, and then all of a sudden a few years ago it's switched, and I feel like adults, parents are so much worse, and I don't feel like I have a right to talk because I'm not a parent, and I know parents get a little uppity when somebody who's not a parent talks about parenting, but it's so easy to just look. I know that as an entertainer, I don't do magic in restaurants anymore, but even a few years ago, as I was on the tail end of doing magic and I was still maintaining one restaurant somewhere, even a few years ago, I would see it where you would come up to the table and say, I'm the magician here tonight, and you remember what it used to be like, even when we were working together, or kids, families would, they would just light up, and like parents were like, thank goodness there's something for our kids to do, and then they would watch their kids experience magic, maybe for the first time live, like that close. Yeah, you never get that close. And even as of a few years ago, this started happening, and now it's really bad. And I talk to friends who are restaurant magicians these days. The parents, they will say yes, and then they'll make their kids put their phones down. The kids don't want to. The kids don't want to watch magic. They get upset that they have to watch magic. And then after they make their kids put their phones down, the kids start watching, and the parents ignore the performance on their phones. The parents don't even watch their kids
Because someone's entertaining the
experience because someone's entertaining the kids. So you feel like yoga really helped you kind of...
Absolutely. Just to tune into myself.
That's great.
More.
I might have to hit you up for a yoga class at some point. Take me with you or something.
Oh, I love introducing people to yoga.
I don't know if I don't know how those tights are going to work out for me. It seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, it is a bad idea. You don't need to wear tights.
Think sweatpants or something. I'm gonna kind of slightly change gears here. Actually, you know what? Before I change gears, let me stay on the topic of meeting people for the first time. I'm curious because there's always such a different perspective. Like, it's like, I wonder if you asked Chris, if I asked him the same question about meeting you, if he would tell me a very different story or a different perspective on meeting you than you about him. And so I wonder, because I know how it felt like for me to walk into the Frog and have you be so open to the idea, which in Connecticut was very different. I came from Buffalo, where there was a magician in every restaurant. Right. No one in Connecticut had a magician or had even thought of it or heard of such a thing. And you were so open to it, where, I don't know if you know, but like, I talked to 100 restaurants in 3 months, and you were the only person who even entertained the idea, let alone actually said yes.
I thought you were so kooky, and I loved it. I was like, yeah, I'll give you a chance. I'm not going to pay you a lot at first, but...
Yeah. But what's amazing about that is that because I had just moved and I had no other work waiting for me, I was expecting to be able to get work quickly because I had done so well in upstate New York and in Buffalo, and then I didn't realize how different Connecticut was. And for the first 6 months of living here, I burned through all my savings, and I was really almost borderline couldn't afford to eat. And for the first few months, the Frog was like pretty much the only income I had, even though it was very small at the time. And it was something. And there was a time of just 2 or 3 months in when one of your former business partners, they, for whatever reason, when I came in one night, they said, we'd like to only have you here every other week, or maybe not at all. Maybe we just don't want to do this anymore. I couldn't afford to lose 2 days of my 4, let alone be fired at all. There's no way I would have made it. And I was panicked, and I reached out to you, and you vetoed that decision right away. I've always wondered why, what you saw that they didn't.
Oh, geez. I have to bring myself back to that moment. I know I had friends who personally enjoyed seeing you there. My children enjoyed seeing you there. I told them about the interview. They're like, oh my God, really? We loved him. I think I saw the value in it, and I saw it growing. And he and I butted heads on a lot of things, which is why he ended up being my former business partner. Hope he's not listening.
That's why I said they and not he.
Yeah. And it grew. Like, people came there to see you. Was it Tuesday nights?
Oh, well, I don't know what we started doing. We ended up doing Saturdays. Crazy busy eventually. Actually, at one point it got almost too busy. Towards the end, it was almost so busy I was starting to have trouble working there, and I think we were starting to talk about switching to a less busy night to try to increase a less busy night instead. Exactly. But that's interesting because you saw the potential long term. You saw potential instead of seeing what was actually in front, because in those days I used to have to explain to restaurants, they would go like, well, let's try it for a week. And I'm like, you're not going to see the value. You need to give me 3 months at least, which I know for a local restaurant owner is a lot of commitment and a lot of money to commit. And having magic on Saturdays was just one more thing for one type of person, not for everybody, but for a certain type of person. And I'm sure...
You became very attuned to the business, because I do recall if food was running late to a table, I could say, Brian, you need to go over to table 8. Their foods are like, keep them occupied. Things are running late. Or if someone was waiting a long time for a table, you would go over to people and they would just forget about that. They would forget the food was late or something happened bad service-wise. So you became very attuned to how we ran the business and keeping customers happy. So you became like a part of the business.
Your restaurant was probably the Iron Frog was the only restaurant. I've worked in probably 12 plus restaurants since I was 16 as a magician. I kind of missed doing it. I can't sustain it anymore for the work that I do now and the commitment and what it pays and everything. But I built my career doing restaurants, and yours really was the only one, with maybe one other exception, that really I felt comfortable. Mm-hmm. Every other restaurant I ever worked in, they went well, but I felt like I was just a stranger kind of meddling in their business once a week. Like a lot of times, that's probably too harsh, but I didn't feel like I became a part of the family in most restaurants. Like they liked me on that night for those 2 hours, but I really felt like I could come in anytime on any day and people would treat me like, part of the family.
They felt like you were part of things. All the cooks knew who you were.
Yeah.
They'd be like, "What are you gonna show us?"
I've ran into them randomly since.
Really? August, right?
Yeah, back in August. Totally, like I don't know, like an hour from here. Lindsay and I were out doing something. We just, on a whim, walked into a restaurant in some town we'd never been in before.
Okay.
And was it Kevin and the whole crew?
Yeah.
They
Yes.
they were all there. It was like, what? We got that photo. We texted you a selfie.
Yeah,
It was crazy.
that was great.
That's so wild. I'm going to wrap up with, if you ran into a childhood friend, someone that you haven't seen or heard from or had any contact with in, 20 plus years, no social media, right? What would most surprise them about you?
Oh, geez. Probably that I don't live in my hometown or home state. Everyone stayed in that area. My whole family is still in the town I grew up from, and I flew the coop when I was 18.
Where are you from?
South Hadley, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not too far away.
Hop across the the
close
border,
enough
but
to go home, but far enough that no one does the drop in.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Right.
Why would they be surprised by that?
Because my whole family is still in town.
Would they be surprised that you've run, these successful businesses and kind of went out on your own, or would that be something that they would be like, yeah, I could totally see that?
I think they would say they could totally see it because I was kind of always a little bit unique in wanting to do my own thing, and I didn't always do things that made other people happy. If I was going to date someone, it was from the town with that nobody liked anyone. It was an opposing football team. I'd be like, oh great. I was like, do things on my own.
Did you do things like that out of just kind of a anarchic, like I want to cause trouble, or because you saw something in it that nobody else saw?
Probably I saw something that no one else saw, and I've always been very independent. I'm the daughter of a strong German woman who's an entrepreneur. And so...
What does your mom do?
She was in the travel industry. She owned a travel agency for years. She doesn't anymore because the Travelocity, everything took over, but she's also...
We could have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah, she's in her late 70s too, and she still has people who call her from all around the country to book tours. But no, she owned her own business and did really well at it. Very successful, worked her ass off.
I really appreciate your time and coming in on I don't know, a day off, or do you get days off now that this is a little bit calmer here?
I get days off all the time that I come in and work.
You get days off and you come, yeah, of course. And isn't it a curse? We can just work from everywhere now all the time.
Seriously, because I can do a lot of this from home too.
Yeah.
The back office stuff.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thanks for not just taking a chance, when you were younger on dating somebody else in some weird place, or taking a chance in a restaurant, but thank you for taking a chance on me, because it dramatically changed the course of my life in ways I didn't know at the time. All I was trying to do was make ends meet at the time, but getting that foundation, having that, it's the closest thing a self-employed magician would ever have to like a paycheck. Having that and knowing that I never felt like I was in danger of that someday you were gonna try to cut costs and get rid of them, and that I was gonna be the first thing you were gonna do to cut costs. I always knew it was possible, it's always possible, but I never felt like that. That security, even if it was kind of an imagined security, gave me such a groundwork for building this crazy thing that I've done. So thank you for that. Really
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
It goes back to the Iron Frog being a safe place.
It really was.
Thanks so much for tuning in to One New Person. Before you find a funny cat video and move on, I just wanted to share a couple of takeaways from this episode. First, even though she didn't say it in these words, Pam attributes her success to listening. Listening to the community and its people, and showing up in a way that was desperately needed. And it wasn't a fluke. She did it again with a completely different type of restaurant. The lesson? Find the people you want to impact and listen to them. They'll tell you what to do. Second, I love that Pam discovered the power of staying present by doing exactly that. By opening herself up to meeting new people on that fateful night, she met Chris, who led her to yoga, which taught her how to be even better at staying present and mindfulness. The lesson here? All good things come from stepping outside of our comfort zone. And if you're anxious about it, it's okay to set up a safety net, as long as you leap anyway. This is One New Person. I'm Brian Miller, and we'll see you next time.